I never thought I'd find myself writing a story like this, but here I am, sharing my reality in hopes that maybe someone else can learn from my experience. My name's Mike, and I'm just an average guy, working a solid job, married to a woman named Sarah, and we have a 10-year-old son named Jake. Life was pretty good, but lately, things started to feel off. At first, it was subtle. Sarah began coming home later from her yoga classes, claiming that she was picking up new routines to get in shape for the summer. I was supportive, encouraging her to take time for herself. But then she started changing her appearance, more makeup, different clothes, all of which she said were just part of her newfound self-care. At first, I thought it was great. She was investing in herself. But then I noticed other changes. She became more distant, less engaged in our conversations, and always had her phone glued to her hand. I remember the night everything changed. Jake was at a sleepover and Sarah had promised to be home early. But as the hours ticked by, I began to feel uneasy. I found myself packing around the house, glancing at the clock every few minutes. By the time she stumbled in around midnight, I was on edge. She reeked of cheap perfume, and when I asked where she'd been, she gave me a flimsy excuse about a friend from yoga needing a ride. Something inside me snapped. The next day, I decided to do a little digging. It wasn't like I had to dig far. Sarah had been leaving her laptop open more often, and I noticed a chat app that I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I scrolled through the messages. My gut twisted when I saw them. Flirty banter, plans to meet up, and then the gut-wrenching realization. She was sharing intimate moments with Jake's baseball coach, a guy named Tom. Tom was the picture of everything I wasn't: confident, athletic, and the kind of guy who could charm anyone with a smile. I felt sick. My world was crashing down around me. I needed proof, something that I could confront Sarah with, so I started keeping an eye on their exchanges. After a few days of sleepless nights and growing anxiety, I found the final piece of the puzzle. A photo of them together, his arm wrapped around her waist, both of them grinning like they just won the lottery. The moment I saw that picture, fury consumed me. I confronted her that night, my hands shaking from a mix of rage and disbelief. "Who the hell is Tom?" I demanded, the words coming out in a harsh whisper, barely able to control my voice. The look on her face was a mix of shock and guilt, but she quickly masked it with defensiveness. "What do you mean? He's just a coach, Mike." "You're being paranoid," she shot back, her tone icy. I laid it all out, every detail I had found, the messages, the picture. Her reaction was nothing short of infuriating. She tried to downplay it, claiming it was all innocent, a few flirty texts that meant nothing. I could see right through her lies, but she just kept digging, spinning her narrative until I felt like I was the one in the wrong for being curious. "You just don't understand, Mike. You've been so busy with work and I needed someone to talk to," she said, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. I spent that night in a haze of emotions: rage, betrayal, disbelief. It was hard to fathom that the woman I had loved for over a decade could betray me like this. I felt a dull ache in my chest, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. How could she do this to our family, to Jake? The thought of my son facing the fallout of her actions made my blood boil even more. As the days passed, I found myself spiraling through a labyrinth of grief. I was angry, yes, but I was also sad, sad for the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared. I felt so alone in my pain, like I was living in a parallel universe where everything I thought I knew was a lie. I wanted to scream, cry, or break something, but I knew I couldn't let her see how much she affected me. I had to come up with a plan, something that would help me regain control over my life, something that would make her feel the weight of what she had done. I made a decision then. This would not go unanswered, and I wouldn't just sit back and let her get away with it. I had a plan for revenge, something that would ensure Tom would pay for what he had done. I wasn't just going to let him ruin my family. No, I was going to make sure he was banned from every team and club around. I had to act carefully, but I was determined. I'd make sure that anyone who enabled this betrayal faced consequences. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about all of it: my dignity, my family, and my life. That was the turning point for me, the moment I decided to take back my power. And with each passing day, I became more resolved to see my plan through. The days turned into a blur as I plotted my revenge. I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins like a drug. It was intoxicating. I was no longer the hurt husband reeling from betrayal. I was a man on a mission, and I had a singular target, Tom. To execute my plan, I needed to gather evidence. I began by reaching out to other parents in Jake's league, making casual conversations during practices and games. I learned that Tom had a bit of a reputation, talking too much with the moms, stepping over the lines of professionalism. It felt like I was gaining ground. Every conversation revealed more about him, and I noted every detail. I became a detective in my own life, piecing together the puzzle of Tom's character. One evening, after a particularly intense practice, I struck up a conversation with Corinne, another mom I had gotten close to. She was not only friendly but also the team's unofficial gossip hub. I decided to test the waters. "You know, I've heard some parents say Tom can be a bit inappropriate," I said casually, watching her reaction. Her eyes widened and she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Oh, he can be. I've heard things here and there. There was a rumor last season about him and one of the moms. I don't know the details, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on." Bingo. I felt like I was onto something, and with that I started laying the groundwork for my next steps. I began documenting every interaction. I took notes on practices, conversations, and the way Tom interacted with Sarah. I even started taking discreet photos during the games. I was careful, always staying inconspicuous while ensuring that I had ample evidence to support whatever I needed down the line. I wanted to make sure I had a complete picture before I moved forward. On top of that, I decided to reach out to the league's board members under the guise of a concerned parent. I crafted an email outlining my worries about Tom's behavior, citing anecdotes I had gathered from other parents. I didn't disclose everything, but I made it clear that I believed he was crossing the line between coach and parent. I wanted them to take my concerns seriously, and I made sure to emphasize that I wasn't the only one worried. While I was deep into my mission, Sarah remained blissfully unaware. She was still keeping up appearances, insisting that I was just being paranoid. She would come home late, often mentioning team meetings or coaching clinics. I felt a pang of anger every time she casually mentioned Tom's name, but I pushed it down, focusing instead on the satisfaction of my plan unfolding. One night, after another argument where she dismissed my concerns about Tom, I decided to take a different approach. I feigned acceptance, telling her that maybe I had been too harsh, that I understood how much she valued the support of the team. I played the dutiful husband, and she seemed to appreciate it. I could see the tension in her shoulders relax, and for a moment I felt guilty for the facade I was maintaining. But I quickly reminded myself of the bigger picture. This was about justice. As the weeks passed, I continued to gather evidence and strategize. I was preparing to escalate my plan, but I also began noticing something. The more I focused on Tom, the more I started to see how deeply the betrayal had wounded me. Jake was oblivious, and I tried my best to shield him from the turmoil. I wanted to maintain a semblance of normalcy in his life, but it was difficult to hide my emotional turmoil. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I finally decided to confront Sarah again. I needed her to see the depth of her betrayal, to understand that what she did was not just a fleeting mistake. It was destroying our family. I waited until after dinner, when Jake was nestled in his room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. I took a deep breath, mustering all the courage I had left. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but steeled with emotion. She looked up from her phone, a mix of annoyance and curiosity on her face. "What now, Mike?" she replied, clearly irritated. I laid it all out: the evidence I had gathered, the comments from other parents, the emails I had sent to the league. I was calm, but I could feel the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You think this is just going to go away? That I'm just going to ignore what's happening?" I demanded, my heart racing. She went pale, the reality of my words finally settling into her brain. "You wouldn't," she stammered, disbelief painted across her features. "Watch me," I replied coldly, feeling a wave of satisfaction as I saw her begin to panic. "You need to understand the consequences of your actions, Sarah. This isn't just about you and Tom anymore." Her defense mechanisms kicked in. She started to deny everything, claiming I was overreacting, that I was twisting the truth. But I stood firm. I wasn't going to be swayed by her lies anymore. I needed her to see that I was done being the victim. The confrontation ended with her storming off, leaving me standing in the living room, heart pounding, feeling a mix of triumph and despair. I had taken a stand, and in that moment I felt a flicker of hope that maybe I could regain control over my life. But I knew this was just the beginning. I had to see my plan through. Tom would pay for what he did, and Sarah would learn that betrayal comes with consequences. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. After the confrontation with Sarah, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and uncertainty. I had finally found the courage to stand up for myself, but the road ahead seemed fraught with complications. I was determined to execute my plan against Tom and expose his inappropriate behavior, but more than that, I needed to ensure that Sarah understood the gravity of her betrayal. Days turned into a blur of strategy and planning. I continued to gather more evidence against Tom, reaching out to other parents in the league. I discovered that several families had similar concerns but had never voiced them. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone in this. The seed of doubt had been planted among the other parents, and I was determined to nurture that discontent until it grew into a full-blown investigation. I decided to organize a meeting with some of the concerned parents. I reached out to Corinne, who had already shared her suspicions with me, and she agreed to help me rally others. We sent out a group message, inviting everyone to discuss important matters concerning team safety at a local coffee shop. I was anxious, but excited to finally have the support I needed to confront this situation head-on. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. My mind was racing with thoughts of how to approach the other parents and what evidence to present. I felt a weight on my shoulders, knowing that this could potentially shatter many families, including my own. But I kept reminding myself that I had to do this for Jake, for our family, and for all the other kids who were being coached by someone who clearly couldn't respect boundaries. The next day, when I walked into the coffee shop, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I saw Corinne sitting at a table with 4 other parents, all looking expectant and slightly nervous. I took a deep breath and approached them, my heart pounding. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it," I said, trying to maintain a calm exterior. As we settled in, I explained my concerns about Tom and what I had discovered over the past few weeks. I took my time, detailing my findings and the evidence I had collected. I watched their expressions shift from curiosity to disbelief, then to concern. When I revealed the messages I had gathered, the room fell silent. "Wow, I had no idea it was that serious," one dad named Greg said, shaking his head. "I remember my wife mentioning something odd about Tom, but I didn't think much of it." Corinne chimed in. "I've heard whispers from other parents too, but we all thought we were being paranoid. This is bigger than we realized." As I laid out my plan to approach the league about Tom's behavior, I felt a sense of camaraderie building. The other parents rallied behind me, sharing their own experiences and frustrations. We brainstormed ideas for how to present our concerns to the league's board. By the end of the meeting, I felt like we had formed a small army. We were all in this together, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. We agreed to compile our evidence and set a date for a meeting with the league officials. As we left the coffee shop, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about creating a safe environment for our kids. Despite the momentum I felt, the emotional toll was still heavy. I returned home later that night, and Sarah was waiting for me in the living room. She looked tense, and I could sense the unease lingering in the air. "We need to talk," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and apprehension. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for another confrontation. "What do you want, Sarah?" I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I can't believe you're trying to ruin Tom's career over some texts," she spat, frustration evident in her eyes. "You're going to destroy everything for us because of this. Destroy everything." I shot back, incredulity in my voice. "You think I'm the one who's destroying things? Look in the mirror, Sarah. You're the one who cheated on me. You're the one who put our family in jeopardy. She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, please, you act like you're the only one who's suffering here. You're just blinded by your own anger. I thought we were supposed to be a team, but you're acting like a petulant child. I could feel my blood boiling, but I forced myself to remain calm. This isn't just about me, Sarah. This affects Jake, too. We can't have someone like Tom around him if he's crossing boundaries with parents. You're being dramatic, she retorted, her voice rising. You're going to ruin his life over this. This is ridiculous. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. I'm not going to sit back and let this happen, Sarah. You need to understand that your actions have consequences. She folded her arms, visibly upset but unwilling to back down. You're making a mistake, Mike. You're going to regret this. Feeling emotionally drained, I decided to retreat to my office, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. I couldn't believe how quickly our conversations had devolved. It was like we were speaking two entirely different languages. I sat at my desk, staring out the window, trying to process everything. In that moment, I realized that I had to be prepared for the fallout of my actions. Confronting Tom and the league meant there would be consequences for everyone involved, including Sarah and Jake. But I also knew that I had to protect my son from the toxic influences in his life. As I sat there, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I would see this through to the end. I had to stand firm in my beliefs, even if it meant facing the wrath of my wife. I couldn't let her manipulation derail me. I needed to stay focused on the goal, ensuring that Tom faced the consequences of his actions. With that thought in mind, I started preparing for our meeting with the league, knowing that the days ahead would challenge everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my role as a father. But I was ready. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for Jake and every other child who deserved better. The day of the meeting with the league arrived, and I felt a rush of anxiety mixed with anticipation. I gathered my documents and evidence, ensuring I had everything organized. As I drove to the community center, I rehearsed my main points in my head. This was not just about vengeance. It was about protecting our children. When I arrived, I noticed a group of parents milling about, their expressions a mixture of concern and determination. Karen was already there, and she greeted me with a nod of encouragement. "We're ready for this, Mike," she said as we found a corner to huddle in. As we waited for the meeting to start, I could feel the tension building in the air. The board members were scheduled to arrive soon, and I knew we had to present a united front. Other parents trickled in, each with their own stories and experiences with Tom. I felt a sense of strength in numbers. Together, we could make a difference. Finally, the meeting began. The board members, three stern-faced individuals, took their seats at the front of the room. I could see their expressions harden as they glanced at the group of us, clearly not expecting a full house. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I reminded myself why I was there. Karen started by summarizing our concerns, speaking eloquently about the importance of maintaining a safe environment for our children. Other parents chimed in, sharing their stories and observations about Tom's behavior. I felt a swell of pride as I watched them speak. Each testimony was a piece of evidence, a building block in our case against him. When it was my turn, I stood up, heart racing. I took a deep breath, clutching my notes tightly. "I'm here today because I believe our children's safety is paramount," I began, glancing around the room. "I've witnessed inappropriate behavior from Tom, both in his communications with parents and in his treatment of our kids. We cannot allow this to continue." I presented my evidence, showing messages and pictures that illustrated my points. With every piece of evidence, I saw the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to concern. It was working. I could feel the momentum building. Then, as I laid out the final point, I noticed a flicker of movement in the back of the room. Sarah walked in, her face a mask of anger and disbelief. I felt a jolt of panic hit me. What was she doing here? My heart raced as she made her way to the front, confronting me with her piercing glare. "Mike, this is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You're ruining lives over some misunderstandings." The room fell silent, all eyes on us. "Sarah, this isn't just a misunderstanding," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. This is about protecting our son and every other kid in this league. She scoffed, crossing her arms. You're being paranoid. You're putting our family in jeopardy because of your ego. I felt the anger rising within me, but I fought to maintain my composure. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is bigger than you or me. It's about accountability. Accountability for what? She snapped back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. For being friendly, for wanting to support Jake's team. The board members exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard by the intensity of our exchange. "Ma'am, please sit down," one of them said, attempting to regain control of the meeting, but Sarah wasn't done. "You think this will make everything better, don't you? You think you're some kind of hero by ruining Tom." She turned to the board members. "You can't take his life away for this. What about his family?" The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel the weight of her words. I had expected some backlash, but not like this. I needed to stay focused. "This is about preventing further harm," I said firmly. "He's crossed lines, and it's not just a friendly relationship. It's inappropriate, and it needs to be addressed." The board members nodded, their brows furrowed in thought. "We'll take your concerns seriously," one of them said, looking at me. "But we also need to investigate further before making any decisions." I felt a mix of relief and frustration. It wasn't the immediate resolution I had hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. As the meeting concluded, I could see Sarah seething, her frustration palpable. Once we stepped outside, she cornered me, her voice low but furious. "You just had to embarrass me, didn't you? You're dragging our family through the mud over this." "Dragging our family through the mud," I retorted, incredulous. "You're the one who made this public. You're the one who chose to cheat on me." Her face contorted with anger, and for a moment I thought she might lash out physically. Instead, she took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "You don't understand what this has done to us. You're so fixated on revenge that you can't see how this affects Jake." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. "What about the impact on Jake if Tom continues to coach him? What if he gets hurt? You're not thinking about that. Maybe you should think about how this is tearing our family apart." She shot back, tears brimming in her eyes. For the first time, I saw a crack in her facade. I hadn't wanted this to turn into a war. I wanted to protect what we had built together. But the truth was, she had already destroyed that foundation with her actions. "I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to ensure Jake is safe," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I don't know if I can stay with someone who is willing to ruin others to feel better about himself," she said, her voice trembling. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten, realizing that this was the crux of our battle. She didn't want to face the reality of her actions, and I was standing in the way of her denial. As we stood there, I felt the weight of our situation settle heavily on my shoulders. I had fought so hard for justice, but at what cost? Would I lose her completely in the process? "Maybe we need to consider what this is doing to us," I said finally, my voice softer now, almost pleading. "Can we find a way to work through this without tearing each other apart?" She looked conflicted, torn between her anger and the love we once had. "I need time, Mike. I don't know if I can forgive you for this." With that, she turned away, leaving me standing in the parking lot, feeling more alone than ever. I had fought for justice, but now I was faced with the reality that it might cost me everything I held dear. I felt the weight of my decisions crashing down on me, and for the first time, I questioned whether my quest for revenge was worth the potential loss of my family. The road ahead was uncertain, and I had to decide if I was prepared to face whatever came next. I couldn't change Sarah, but I could control my own actions. And for the sake of my son, I had to see this through, no matter the consequences. The aftermath of the meeting weighed heavily on me. I returned home, feeling the oppressive silence of the house as I stepped through the door. I was met with the stark reality of my situation. Sarah was in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she rinsed out a dish. I could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her hands moved with purpose, as if she was trying to keep herself busy to avoid facing the truth. "Hey," I said, my voice tentative. She turned slightly but didn't meet my gaze. "Hey," she replied, her tone flat. The air felt charged with unspoken words. I wanted to reach out to bridge the widening chasm between us, but I didn't know how. I took a breath and decided to take a risk. Can we talk about what happened today? She sighed heavily, placing the dish down and finally turning to face me. What's there to talk about, Mike? You've made your decision. I'm trying to protect our son, I explained, frustration creeping into my voice. Tom is not just a friendly coach, and you know that. This isn't just about my feelings, it's about Jake's safety. Is it? She shot back, her eyes hard. Or is it just about proving a point? You're so caught up in this vendetta that you're willing to burn everything down, our marriage, our family, just to feel vindicated. I felt a surge of anger mixed with hurt. You're missing the point, Sarah. You're the one who made this personal when you chose to cheat. I didn't ask for this, but I won't stand by and let it continue. We stood there facing each other, the intensity of our emotions filling the space between us. You're making it impossible for us to have any kind of conversation, she said, her voice rising. All I hear is anger and blame. You're not even trying to see my side. Your side. I snapped, the frustration boiling over. What about my side? What about Jake's side? You've completely disregarded our family for a fling. At that moment, I saw a flash of vulnerability in her eyes, something that made me realize how deep this wound went. Maybe I am trying to escape, she whispered, her voice suddenly small. Maybe I didn't know how to deal with everything that was happening in our lives. Escape by cheating, I replied incredulously. That's your solution. You need to face what you've done instead of running away from it. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I made a mistake and I'm sorry, but you're so focused on punishment that you're forgetting about the love we used to have. I felt my heart crack a little. Love. Sarah, how can I love someone who betrays me like this? How can we rebuild anything when trust is shattered? She stepped closer, desperation in her voice. I don't want to lose you, Mike, but I need you to understand that we both have to own up to our mistakes. Can't we try to work through this together instead of tearing each other apart? Her words struck a chord deep within me. Despite everything, I didn't want to lose her either. I had been so focused on my mission for revenge that I hadn't thought about the possibility of reconciliation. Maybe we could find a way forward, not just for ourselves, but for Jake. Taking a deep breath, I replied, I want to try, Sarah, but we need to be honest with each other and we need to address the issues in our marriage. It can't just be about Tom and what he did. We need to talk about us. She nodded slowly, the fight starting to drain from her. Okay, let's talk, but I need you to promise me you won't push this further until we've truly tried to fix what's broken between us. I hesitated, the memories of my plan swirling in my mind. Could I really hold off on confronting Tom, knowing what I knew? But as I looked into Sarah's eyes, I realized that my quest for revenge had become a distraction from what truly mattered, our family. All right, I said finally, I'll hold off for now, but I want to see real change. No more secrets, no more lies. She nodded, relief washing over her face. I promise, I'll do whatever it takes. That night, we talked for hours, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. We delved into the reasons behind her infidelity, the pressures we both felt, and the emotional distance that had grown between us over time. It was raw and painful, but it was also cathartic. In the days that followed, we continued to have those difficult conversations. We both agreed to seek counseling, something I had never thought would be necessary, and made a commitment to work on our marriage. I realized that I had also contributed to our struggles. My focus on work and providing had distracted me from being emotionally available to her. As we navigated our way through the rubble of our relationship, I found myself reflecting on what I truly wanted. The quest for revenge against Tom still loomed in my mind, but I began to see it through a different lens. While I still believed his behavior was unacceptable, I also recognized that my focus on him had become a way to avoid dealing with the gaping wound in my own marriage. I needed to prioritize healing, not just for Sarah and me, but for Jake as well. I began to talk with the other parents about postponing any formal complaints about Tom. I wanted to see if he would change his behavior on his own, if the conversations we had sparked among parents would lead to a more significant shift within the league. While I felt a sense of responsibility to protect the kids, including my own, I also knew that I had to put my family first. I couldn't risk losing Sarah completely, especially when there was a chance for redemption. It wasn't an easy decision, but I felt it was the right one. In focusing on rebuilding my relationship with Sarah and being a better father, I could create a safe environment for Jake without resorting to revenge. As the weeks progressed, I began to see small signs of healing. Sarah and I started communicating better. We were attending counseling sessions, and I could feel the walls between us slowly coming down. While the specter of Tom still haunted us, I was beginning to understand that true healing would take time and effort. It was a journey we had to undertake together, one step at a time. With every day that passed, I felt a little lighter. I was learning to forgive, starting with myself. It was a process, and I knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward that didn't involve destruction but rather rebuilding. I had made the choice to focus on what truly mattered, the love and connection with my family. The revenge could wait. As the days turned into weeks, I could feel the healing process taking root in our family. Sarah and I worked diligently on our marriage, attending counseling sessions regularly and engaging in open conversations that we had long neglected. It felt strange yet comforting to be vulnerable with each other again. I could sense that she was genuinely trying to rebuild trust, and I was committed to doing the same. Meanwhile, I kept my promise to hold off on confronting Tom. I attended more of Jake's games and practices, keeping an eye on the dynamics between the kids and the coaches, but I was also watching how Tom interacted with other parents. He seemed to have toned down his behavior considerably, likely due to the whispers circulating among the parents. I was hopeful that perhaps the team's culture was starting to shift, and that alone felt like a small victory. Jake was blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had rocked our family. He continued to play baseball, thriving with his friends and enjoying being a kid. I made it a point to spend more quality time with him, playing catch in the backyard and discussing everything from school projects to his favorite video games. My bond with Jake deepened, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose as a father. One afternoon, as we were practicing his swing, Jake paused and looked up at me. "Dad, I really like Coach Tom. He makes practice fun and he believes in us," he said, his face glowing with enthusiasm. I felt my stomach twist. "Yeah, he does seem to have a way of motivating the kids," I replied carefully, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Why don't you like him?" Jake asked, curiosity etched on his face. I knelt down, meeting my son's eyes. "It's not that I don't like him, buddy. I just think it's important that he treats everyone with respect, just like I want everyone to treat you." Jake nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer, but I knew this conversation would be just one of many. I had to navigate these waters carefully, not just for my sake but for his as well. Weeks later, I received an email from the league's board. They were scheduling a meeting to address the concerns that had been raised about Tom. My heart raced. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face this again, if I would be able to speak without letting anger cloud my judgment. But I also knew I had a responsibility to the other parents and, most importantly, to my son. As the meeting approached, I discussed it with Sarah. "I don't want to go back to that place of anger," I admitted. "But I feel like I have to be there for everyone to ensure our kids are safe." She nodded, understanding the complexity of my feelings. "You've come so far, Mike. Just remember, you're doing this for them, not for revenge. Speak from the heart." When the day of the meeting finally arrived, I walked into the same community center where everything had begun. The air felt charged with tension again, but this time it was different. I wasn't just the betrayed husband. I was a father advocating for his son and his friends. As I stood before the board members, the other parents gathered behind me, I felt a sense of solidarity in our numbers. I spoke calmly, detailing the changes I had witnessed in Tom's behavior since our last meeting and emphasizing the importance of accountability. I urged the board to implement more stringent guidelines for coaches and to promote a culture of respect and safety within the league. The board listened attentively. They asked questions and seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of the kids. When the meeting concluded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had voiced my concerns without letting anger take the lead. I had fought for Jake and his friends, and I could feel the support of the other parents standing behind me. Afterward, as I walked out of the community center, I noticed Tom standing off to the side looking uneasy. He approached me and I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "Mike," he began, his voice low, "I know things have been complicated." I crossed my arms, unsure of what to say. "It's not just complicated, Tom. It's unacceptable. You need to understand the impact of your actions, not just on me, but on the kids." Nodded, looking contrite. "I realize that now. I never meant for it to go that far. I've been working on myself and I want to be a better coach." "Being a better coach also means respecting boundaries," I replied firmly. "If you want a fresh start, you need to earn back the trust of the parents and the kids." He took a deep breath, and for a moment I could see the weight of his choices reflected in his eyes. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. I didn't know what the future held for Tom or for our league, but I had made my voice heard. I had chosen the path of healing and accountability over revenge, which felt like a victory in its own right. Back at home, Sarah and I continued to work on our marriage. We embraced the challenges as opportunities to grow closer. I found that by focusing on rebuilding our relationship, I was also fostering a positive environment for Jake. We began to create new traditions, making family dinners a priority and taking weekend trips together. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Jake recounted the day's events at practice, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Coach Tom said I'm improving. He thinks I might be able to pitch next season." I exchanged a glance with Sarah, and we both smiled, feeling a sense of hope. I realized that while the past could not be erased, the future was still unwritten. It was in our hands to create a loving, supportive family environment for Jake, filled with trust and open communication. Through all the turmoil, I had learned invaluable lessons about love, forgiveness, and the importance of standing up for what mattered. I knew that while life would throw challenges our way, we would face them together as a family. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had fought for my family, for Jake, and in the process, I had learned to fight for myself as well. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next, together as a family.